I'm a 22-year-old male, and I always celebrate the 4th of July. I usually celebrate with my family, but this year I couldn't because I moved to a different city and I just didn't feel like traveling. I was going to celebrate with my girlfriend and some of her friends, but her friends decided to cancel at the last minute, so it was just me and her. I packed some towels and snacks because we were going to watch the fireworks on the beach. When we arrived, I discovered that there were hardly any people. My girlfriend and I got out of the car and started walking to the beach. We sat down on the soft sand and waited. We both had swimsuits on under our clothes because we were planning to go swimming after the fireworks show. Eventually, the fireworks show started and we both watched. It was beautiful, and it lasted about 30 minutes and then it ended. When it ended, we both stood up and took off our clothes. We got into the water and just started talking and hanging out. We swam a little bit and then decided to get out. When we got out, the time I remember was 12:34 a.m. We wrapped ourselves in the towels and began walking back to the car. As we were walking, I saw a figure behind my car. It was too dark to see what it looked like, but I could still make out the shape. As we got closer, I noticed that the person had on a hood, so I couldn't see their face. I turned to my girlfriend and pointed out the person, and she looked at me and nodded. I could see that she had noticed it too and that she was pretty frightened. I looked at my girlfriend and told her, "Okay, at the count of 3, run back to the car." She agreed, and then I started counting. 3, 2, 1, go! She ran and got into the car, and then I began running too. Right when I made it to the car door, the person jumped out and tried to grab me. I dodged them and opened the car door. I jumped inside and locked all the doors. Right when I locked the doors, the person started pounding on the window. I drove off and I never looked back. I had this supervisor, Kate. One day we had a discussion that turned into the unexplained, and she told me about something that happened when she was a teenager. She tries to debunk crazy things that have happened, but this one she just has not been able to. It was the summer after she graduated from high school, sometime in the second half of the 1990s. She was 18 at the time, and her friend Billy was a few years older than her, but still lived with his mother in their house. This was in a small city in western Maryland, and Billy's house had just enough land that he could throw some raging day-to-night summer parties, complete with bonfires. At the same time, they weren't totally isolated, and random people from the surrounding neighborhoods would show up to his parties all of the time. One day, Billy met this skater kid named Nick at a park one morning, and being a social animal guy, Billy invited him to hang out with him at the house. Billy probably also took some pity on Nick because Nick told him he was a runaway who was living at the park. They would basically play video games, go on rides, and party till late at night. Nick started showing up every day at Billy's house, knocking out the door at 7 a.m. sharp and engaging him in the morning till night drinking. He was about 16 with dark eyes and dark spiky hair. And remember, this was the late 90s, so that was normal. And seemed fairly normal and everything except for a couple of things. The first thing was that he always wore the same thing, a plain t-shirt and a pair of camel print cargo shorts. Despite the fact that he was sleeping at the park, his clothes always looked clean. The second is that he was never seen eating or going to the bathroom, which is weird. So despite the fact that Nick was drinking heavily with Billy, you would think he would have to go at some point. Finally, oddly enough, no one remembers actually feeling Nick's skin. Even my supervisor, who had sat next to him in a car during a road trip. She had hung out with Billy and Nick at Billy's house 2 times, and each time she and her friend felt like something was very off about Nick, especially when he would give off this laugh that just sounded very evil and maniacal. He also seemed to get just kookier and weirder when they went on a road trip and got further away from Billy's city. Nick would also never shut up about his father's gun collection. Finally, Billy's hospitality has reached its limits. After 2 weeks of waking Billy up at 7 a.m. to go party, Billy snapped at Nick at his front door. He said, "Look, Nick, you've been coming here every morning for 2 weeks. You're waking up my mother, who's trying to sleep. You really need to go now. Please, just come back later." Then he slammed the door shut. Nick never showed up again. Billy came to Katie a little bit later with a newspaper article. It was about Nick, who had apparently killed himself. Nick had escaped from the mental asylum his parents had put him in that was located in Billy's town, got to his father's house, and shot himself with his father's gun. Billy was originally upset because he felt like he must have put Nick over the edge when he kicked him out, until he checked the dates of the article. Nick had committed suicide on July 10th, 2 weeks before they had met. So this incident is tough for me to talk about. I'm a 27-year-old male and was living in New Hampshire at the time, in an extremely safe town. I lived alone with my dog, Toby, during this time and worked 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. Sharing a duplex was new to me and quite different, especially when your neighbors were very odd. There was a lady in her 60s and a younger man in his 30s. I believe they were mother-son because they wouldn't speak to me. I had no clue, so I tried making small talk, but neither of them would say a word to me. The mother looked beat down with gray hair. She wore the same blue nightgown every time I saw her. I would see the son smoking outside wearing the same white wife beater since I moved in 7 months prior. It was a summer night in July around 11 p.m. and I met Toby out in the backyard. Now mind you, I share a backyard with these creeps. Toby was running around and I heard the neighbor's slide door open. I saw the younger man in his little wife beater shirt walk out onto his deck and he gave me a death glare. My heart dropped and began feeling extreme anxiety. I saw him reach into his pocket and he pulled out a gun. He pointed it at Toby and fired 4 times. I screamed louder than I ever have in my life. The man ran inside and closed his door. I began sprinting towards Toby, but he fled into the woods. I immediately called 911 and told them what happened. The police arrived in 5 minutes and they surrounded our duplex. They placed me in the police car and asked me to tell them what happened. My dog Toby never barked and was the most behaved puppy, so he had no excuse to shoot him. The cops were outside about 15 minutes until they heard 3 gunshots. They rushed inside and found the mother and son deceased, both by bullet wounds. Come to find out later, the son had shot his mother twice and committed suicide with a single shot to his head. Later that night, Toby came back and was shot in his back leg. After a couple surgeries, he came back brand new. This was the most horrific thing I've ever witnessed, and I'm so blessed. Before I begin, I'm a 16-year-old male, and about 3 years ago, I was in Virginia visiting family over the summer. We were right outside the DC area and staying in a 2-story house near the freeway. On the other side of the freeway was a forest. So my mom, her boyfriend Eric, and I were all staying with Eric's parents. We had brought some night vision binoculars and decided that tonight was the perfect time to use them. So after dinner, we geared up and we headed out. We passed under the freeway and head into the woods. When we got about 5 minutes into the forest, we sat down our bag and took out our binoculars. My mom looks around with them for a little while, seeing a few squirrels here and there. She gets tired of them and passes them on to me. I look around for a while, being careful not to look at the freeway for fear of being blinded. And then I spot something behind a tree about 50 feet to our left. I concentrate on it, trying to figure out what it is. It looks like a pale, bald, anorexic man looking straight at us from behind the tree. I get a bit of anxiety. I feel uneasy, hesitant to believe it's really there. So I asked Eric to take a look just in case. And to my despair, he sees it too. He describes it much the same way I did, and now Eric is a former amateur boxer, and I train MMA almost every day, but neither of us want to stick around to see what this thing is. We start heading back to the house, crossing under the freeway, and we take another look behind us as a car comes by. All 3 of us see glowing eyes lit up by the headlights on the other side of the freeway. We say, screw it, and head back to the house. When we get back, Eric's parents are asleep with my mom, and Eric go upstairs to the guest room. There's only 1 guest room, so I have the couch downstairs. I'm a little too excited after seeing the thing in the woods, so I end up staying up all night. Around 3 a.m., I'm watching TV and start hearing footsteps above me. I immediately remember our earlier encounter and panic just a little. I try to calm down and tell myself it's just one of the dogs or maybe someone who couldn't sleep. I keep hearing the footsteps for a while until I hear a doorknob jiggle. I find it weird that they're trying to open a locked door, but I try to ignore it. They stop, walk around for a few more minutes, and then it's quiet again. I stay up until the sun starts coming up, and then I pass out. My mom wakes me up and I remember the footsteps from the night before. I describe what happened and ask if one of them got up at any time, and she says no, I think it must have been one of the dogs. That is, until she tells me the room above me is the office. No one was in the office and the door stays locked at night. My heart sinks as I piece it all together. I don't know if it was that thing for sure, but I think it was. I've done a lot of research since then trying to figure out what that thing was that night. I found two creatures that seemed to match it. I think it was either a skinwalker or a wendigo. Whichever one it was, I'm just thankful that door was locked. I know I would not have been able to fight that thing no matter how tough I think I am. I was about the age of 13 when this story took place. I lived in an old house just on the outside of a large city and was surrounded by cornfields and forests. I had lived there all of my life before this happened. It was a dreary summer night, which is mostly normal for the place I live in. But on this particular night, something just felt, just off. I had come home from soccer practice around 6 p.m. and my parents always had me in bed by 8. The night went on as usual. I ate dinner, played with my little sister, and did some weightlifting before bed. So I got into bed around 7:45. This story will make better sense if I tell you some things about me. I'm a restless sleeper. I toss and turn, and I get up periodically through the night. I've always had a fascination with the afterlife. Okay, so back to the story. I'm not sure exactly what time I fell asleep, but I didn't really have my usual episodes through the night. This was the first night I slept peacefully in years. I was suddenly awoken by a strange noise coming from the bathroom in my bedroom. Since I had to use the bathroom anyways, I decided to go check it out. I thought it might be a mouse or a bat since we live in the country and the house is old and has holes in the older walls. So I went into the bathroom and I didn't see anything, so I proceeded to use the bathroom. After going, I washed my hands and face, and when I was washing my face, I looked up at the large mirror that overhangs my sink. Since there was still water in my eyes, my vision was blurry and I couldn't really see much. But I thought I saw something behind me, but I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me. I dried my face off and looked up at the mirror again. Right behind me, there was a little girl, clutching my body, almost as if she was hiding from something. Her ghostly outline scared me at first, but as I kept looking, I could tell that whatever was scaring her was coming from the basement. So I walked to my basement door and I opened it slightly at first because I was really scared of what might be behind it. This being said, I've lived in this house my entire life and I've never been in the basement. My dad mentioned to me that it had 3 separate parts, all separated by small windows that you could barely fit through. So I walked down the basement steps and got down to the bottom where the light switch was. I turned it on and all seemed like it was okay. That's until I heard what sounded like crying from one of the other parts of the basement. In my mind, I was thinking, screw this. But in my heart, I knew I had to see what it was. So I ventured through the part of the basement and the light couldn't reach the other side where the other room was. It was pitch black. I still heard the crying, but since it was so dark, I couldn't see anything. Something gave me the urge to go to the far corner of the room because of the way the moonlight reflected off the floor. You can kind of see what the little light you had. I walked over to the corner and stared directly in the middle of the room, and there in the middle of the room was a chair. It had shackles for the feet and what looked like to be some type of restraint for arms or something like that. That's when I noticed that there was someone sitting in that chair. I walked closer only to reveal that it was the same little girl ghost who had been crying previously in the bathroom. She was also crying there and had needles stuck in her arms, draining some type of fluid into her. All was quiet till she started screaming, and it was so high-pitched I thought it sounded like a siren or something of that nature. She was saying words, but I couldn't make it out, anything she was saying, until she spoke 5 menacing words that made my heart sink. She said, "Get out, Daddy is coming." Not even thinking twice, I sprinted up the basement stairs, tripping over my own feet, and fell flat on my face once I reached the top. I got back up and ran into my parents' room and told them what happened. They went down there and checked everything out. I told them about the chair and the little girl that was screaming. They told me that there was no chair in the basement and there had never been 3 parts of the basement. Me not believing them, I walked back down there and the room that I saw the chair in was not there. There had only ever been 2 parts of the basement, my dad said. I told him what I saw and how I knew there had to be some mistake, but I never did see that part of the basement again. I'm 18 now, and I decided to do some research on the house to see if there's any history that could have caused that. I came across an article of a man who had been arrested in 1868 for doing lab experiments on all of his children. After the man was arrested, the police found all 12 skeletons of his children stuffed behind the basement stairs under debris and concrete. Now that I have finally moved out of that house and that I finally have an answer as to what I saw that night, I'm finally at peace. But those 5 words still hang over me to this day. Get out. Daddy is coming.